Well, today we're going to
Uh,
talk about the seventh day Sabbath, and we're going to go to Hebrews. You see, the Sabbath in the pre cross time period in the four Gospels, people say, well, that was before the cross. And we go to church after on Sunday, that's after the cross. And there's one text in the book of Revelation that talks about, the keeping the commandments of God and having the testimony of Jesus. But we're going to look in Hebrews 3 and Hebrews 4, and we're going to look at the rest that is presented there. And for the people who don't realize that that rest is the Sabbath, we are going to go through that today and show exactly what that rest is from, and the examples for violating that rest or Sabbath, but way back in Moses's time. We see here, this here is in December of 2022, and the Jerusalem Post has called for legislation to make Sunday a day of rest in order to heal Israel's divisions. Now, if they went and did that, would it heal their divisions? I believe it would cause more divisions because some of their blessings would be gone. Now we're going to start out by looking about what the Sabbath is. And this here is from Wikipedia. In Abrahamic religions, the Sabbath or Shabbat, which is biblical Hebrew, is a day set aside for rest and worship. Of course, they didn't say it was to be holy in Wikipedia, just for rest and worship. This is from the same article. A day of rest is observed in Islam, which is Friday, Judaism, which is Saturday, and Christianity, which is Sunday. Observances similar to or descend from the Sabbath also exist in other religions. The term may be generally used to describe similar weekly observances in other religions. And then at the end of this here article, it says, in Judaism, the Seventh day Adventist Church, see, in Judaism and the Seventh day Adventist Church and Samaritanism, the Sabbath begins Friday at sundown and ends on Saturday at sundown. Thus, sunset is a common symbol of the Sabbath. And that there is kind of like saying every day at sundown is a symbol of the Sabbath. And so, you know, I kind of disagree with that, but that's what they put in there. And I put up there a symbol question mark. And then this is an article by Christian Educators Academy. The practice of observing Sunday as a Christian Sabbath, I'm going to start by showing where it came from, was formalized in the 4th century when Emperor Constantine made Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire. He declared Sunday as a day of rest, and the decision was later confirmed by the Council of Laodicea in 364 AD. This council also declared that the Christians should not work on Sunday, but should instead spend the day of worship and rest. So we have the soon coming national Sunday law isn't the first time that this declaration has occurred. And continuing in this article, the Sabbath in the early Christian church. First century, initially Christians observed the Sabbath on Saturday as it was continuation of their Jewish heritage, and I would say the Hebrew heritage. However, they also met on Sundays for worship and to commemorate the resurrection of Jesus, which is what they go for now as we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus. Second and third centuries, as Christianity began to separate from Judaism, the practice of observing the Sabbath on Saturday decreased. Instead, Sunday became the primary day of worship and rest for Christians, a practice that was widely accepted by the third century. And I will put it a practice that's just tradition. Fourth century in AD In 321 CE, Emperor Constantine declared Sunday as a day of rest and worship for the Roman Empire. This declaration solidified Sunday as the official day of Christian Sabbath and helped to spread the practice throughout the empire. But now let's go to the New Testament and see what they did then. This is going to be after the Gospels in the context of the seventh-day Sabbath. And we're going to go to Paul's writings, specifically Hebrews. We're going to go through Hebrews 3 and 4. I found this here. I thought that this was kind of interesting because of the ministry that we are in. The great issue so near at hand will weed out those whom God has not appointed, and he will have a pure, true, sanctified ministry prepared for the latter rain. Third volume of Selected Messages. So we'll start in here. Now, so on these here, some of them I put in the titles above when the chapter started. The title of this here in the King James Version, Jesus is greater than Moses. And we will do a comparison on some texts with other versions. The first verse, wherefore, hold brethren, partakers in the heavenly calling, consider the apostle and high priest of our profession, Christ Jesus. And we'll look at that word profession, who was faithful to him that appointed him, as also Moses was faithful in all of his house. And we're going to talk about Moses. For this man was counted worthy of more glory than Moses, is as much as he who had builded the house hath more honor than the house. In other words, Christ has more honor than what the church built back then. For every house is built by some man, but he that buildeth all things is God. And Moses verily was faithful in all his house as a servant, for a testimony of those things which were to be spoken after. And this here will go through some of the things about his testimony back then was an example for them at the time of the end. But Christ as a son over his own house, whose house we are, if we hold fast the confidence and the rejoicing of the hope firm unto the end. Continuing, wherefore, as the Holy Ghost saith today, if you will hear his voice, harden your hearts, as in the provocation in the day of temptation in the wilderness, when your fathers tempted me, proved me, and saw my works 40 years. And so we're going to look at that word provocation, because it's one of those things when you see in the King James Version, when you look at the definition, it may not be exactly what we think it means. And I'm talking about what I thought that it meant. And we're going to see that same word later in this chapter. So provocation, an action that is intended to cause a reaction, especially anger and annoyances. So when Moses was in the wilderness, they provoked God to anger. And so you can see what where this is going. Moses was a type of Christ. He himself had declared to Israel, the Lord thy God will raise up unto thee a prophet from the midst of thee, of thy brethren, like unto me. Unto him ye shall hearken. God saw fit to discipline Moses in the school of affliction and poverty before he could be prepared to lead the hosts of heaven in the earthly Canaan. So people among the 144,000 or the remnant or other people at the time of the end, they wonder why that they are afflicted. They have this affliction and the poverty, why things are coming against them. It's the same thing as Moses. They are preparing them for the soon coming of Christ. But as we go through these things, we don't always see as these things being a test. From this is from Mrs. White, from Desire of Ages. Jesus declared to Satan, "It is written again." Now notice that word again. It is written again, "Thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God." These words were spoken by Moses to the children of Israel when they thirsted in the desert and demanded that Moses should give them water, explaining, "Is the Lord among us or not?" God had wrought marvelous for them, yet in trouble they doubted him and demanded evidence that he was with them. And see, this here very thing is what is talked about in Hebrews, that they are doubting or provoking God. And then we can see, I put in here that there was that when Moses was quoting, I mean, when Christ was quoting, he was quoting Moses. And this is from Matthew 4. Then was Jesus led up in the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil. And when he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, he was afterward and hungered. 40 days and 40 nights. Go back and look at the Israelites wandering in the desert 40 years. Why? Well, I think you all know that when you dishonor God, there's a consequence for it. And then when we skip down to verse 7, Jesus said unto him, "It is written again, Thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God." And so we go to Exodus 17:7, where we see that this happened again. And he called the name of the place Massa and Marba because of the children of the children of Israel, and because they tempted the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" So when Christ was tempted, it was, and Christ used this example because it had been written before that you are not to tempt the Lord. How many today does not know his ways? And continuing on in Hebrews 3, wherefore I was grieved with that generation and said, "Why do they always err in their heart? And they have not known my ways. So I swear in my wrath, they shall not enter into my rest." So this here, once again, they're referring back to the Hebrews and Moses, but because that God was grieved because of their actions back then, and that's why that they could not enter into the rest. And we will look and see what he means by entering into this rest. And I think it actually has more than one meaning. But we're going to be talking about the seventh day Sabbath. We here read the warnings which God gave to ancient Israel. It was not his good pleasure that they should wander so long in the wilderness. He would have brought them immediately to the promised land had they submitted and loved to be led by him. Now, have you ever wondered why we are still here on this planet? Considering this here comment, this is in the first volume of the Testimonies. Continuing on in Hebrews. Take heed, brethren, lest there be any of you an evil heart of unbelief in departing from the living God. I'm going to look at that word unbelief also. But exhort one another daily. In other words, we're to lift each other up, not bring each other down. We're to help each other. We're to love our neighbors, everybody. We're supposed to help them. While it is called today, lest any of you be hardened through your deceitfulness of sin. For we are made partakers of Christ, for we hold the beginning of our confidence steadfast unto the end. While it is said today, if we will hear his voice, harden not your hearts, as in the provocation. And there it's mentioned that word provocation, going back to the Israelites back then. And we can also look at the Egyptians back then as they hardened their hearts also. And here's a thing by on Hebrews 3:15. by Ellen White. As Christ's ambassadors, I would entreat all who read these lines to take heed while it is called today. If you'll hear his voice, harden not your hearts. And we're going to look at this here being Christ's ambassadors, because in Hebrews 3 and 4, they talk about uh, uh, us being witnesses. That is my term for Jesus Christ. And Ellen White calls it ambassadors. And up there, Paul puts it, but we are supposed to exhort one another daily. Continuing, for some, when they had heard, did provoke. That's this that from the provocation above. Howbeit, not all that came out of Egypt by Moses, but with whom he was grieved 40 years, was it not with them that had sinned, whose carcasses fell in the wilderness, and to whom sware that he had not to enter into his rest, but to them that believeth not? So we see that they could not enter in because of unbelief. And there is a big tie in here between this word unbelief and the rest. So where does it say that the carcasses fell in the wilderness? That's back in Numbers 26:65. For the Lord had said of them, they shall surely die in the wilderness, and there was not left a man of them save Caleb, the son of that person, and Joshua, the son of Nun. And I put this in here, and I put up at top, compare this with Sunday keepers today. Notwithstanding, ye would not go up, but rebelled against the commandment of the Lord your God. And ye murmured in your tents and said, because of the Lord hated us, he brought us forth out of the land of Egypt to deliver us into the hand of the Amorites and destroy us. See, they did not know the true character of God. They did not know that all this stuff was preparing them, just like us today. It's preparing us to stand in the time of trouble. And back then, they did not see it as a test. They just they rebelled against God. This is from the book Christ Triumphed. The word came to them, verily my Sabbath ye shall keep. Through the work on the tabernacle must be carried forth with expedition. The Sabbath must not be employed as a working day. Even the work of the Lord's house must give way to the sacred observance of the Lord's rest day. Thus God is jealous for the honor of his memorial of creation. And you see, when it talks about in 3 and 4 the rest day, it later on explains, or the rest, it explains what entering into that rest is. The true Sabbath is to be restored to its rightful position as God's rest day. And this is also, after this National Sunday Law, it will be restored to its rightful place once again. Now we're going to go into Hebrews chapter 4. And here's where a lot of the answers are. Let us therefore fear lest a promise being left us on entering into his rest, any of you should seem to come short of it. For unto us was the gospel preached as well as unto them, referring back to Moses. But the word preached did not profit them, not being mixed with faith in them that heard it. In other words, they had unbelief instead of faith. For we which have believed do enter into rest, as he said, as I have sworn in my wrath, if they shall enter into my rest, although the works were finished from the foundation of the world. There it refers to the seventh day of the week, because that there is what occurred at the foundation of the world. For he spake in a certain place of the seventh day on this wise, and God did rest the seventh day from all his works. So if you go and leave out these verses 3 and 4, and you leave that out, people won't look at it as being the seventh day Sabbath. I was carried, this is from Mrs. White. I was then carried back to the creation and was shown that the first week in which God performed the work of creation in 6 days and rested on the seventh day was just like every other week. The great God in his days of creation and day of rest measured off the first cycle as a symbol for successive weeks till the close of time. In other words, it's not going to change the days of the week. These are the generations of the heavens and of the earth when they were created. God gives us the productions of his work at the close of each literal day. Each day was accounted of him a generation because every day he generated or produced some new portion of his work. On the seventh day of the first week, God rested from his work and then blessed the day of his rest and set it apart for the use of man. So creation was 6 days, and the seventh day was to be kept separate and for worship and holiness. The weekly cycle of 7 literal days, day 6 for labor and the seventh for rest, which has been preserved and brought down through Bible history, originated in the great facts of the first 7 days. When God spoke his law with an audible voice from Sinai, he introduced the Sabbath by saying, "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy." He then declared definitely what should be done on the 6 days and what should not be done on the seventh. He then, in giving the reason for this observing the week, points him back to his example on the first 7 days of time. So when this was given at Mount Sinai, it was a reference to what they all knew, and that was the 7 days of creation, the seventh day being the seventh day Sabbath. So he always refers back, just like we said that when Christ said that you should not tempt the Lord, it was a reference to what was already written and that they already should have already known about. And right after the first 4 verses talking about the seventh day Sabbath, we go more into the Sabbath rest. And in this place again, if they shall enter into my rest. The law of God existed before man was created. The angels were governed by it. Satan fell because he transgressed the principles of God's government. After Adam and Eve were created, God made known to them his law. It was not then written, but was rehearsed to them by Jehovah. So he was very specific in his law to them, to Adam and Eve. The Sabbath of the fourth commandment was instituted in Eden. After God had made the world, he created man upon the earth and made the Sabbath for man. After Adam's sin and fall, nothing was taken from the law of God. Nothing was taken from the law of God. The principles of the Ten Commandments existed before the fall and were of a character suited for the condition of a holy order of beings. After the fall, the principles of those precepts were not changed, but additional precepts were given to meet man in his fallen state. And I believe some of those is the statutes and the judgments and the ordinances that was given. If the law of God had not been transgressed, there would never have been death, and there would never have been a need of additional precepts to suit man's fallen condition. So it was because they had fallen. Hebrews 4:9. There remains then a Sabbath rest for the people of God. And, when you read it in the King James Version, it just says a rest. It does not say a Sabbath. But here we go into, and I found this here very, very interesting for Sunday keepers, or as Melissa said, people to go to church on Sunday. Seeing therefore it remaineth that some must enter therein, and they to whom it was first preached entered not in because of unbelief. Unbelief's a problem. Again, he limiteth a certain day, saying to David, today, after so long a time, as it is said, today, if you will hear his voice, harden not your hearts. And this here, I found this next verse very, very interesting. For if Jesus had given them rest, then would he not afterwards have spoken of another day? Did he speak of another day to keep? He never did. But yet they have done that today. There remaineth therefore a rest. And this is from Strong's Sabbatimos, to the people of God. For he that entered into his rest, he also has ceased from his own works, as God did from him, which is a seventh day Sabbath. Now we're going to go back to verse 9, and we're going to look at other translations outside of the King James versions. I've always said that I always use King James, and if I use anything other translations, I will tell you. Well, this is one of those times that we're going to use some of the other translations. And the first there remaineth therefore a rest unto the people of God. Next version, there remains therefore Sabbath keeping for the people of God. Another version, so that there is still a Sabbath keeping for the people of God. CEV, but God had promised us a Sabbath when we will rest, even though it is not yet come. As it is, however, there still remains for God's people a rest like God's resting on the seventh day, referred right back to the creation seventh day. Murdoch, therefore it is established that the people of God are to have a Sabbath. And this last one here, so there remains a Sabbath keeping for a people of Elam. And then the footnote says, the Greek word is satabismos, or however pronounce it, which means Sabbath keeping. So when you come back to that in King James verse, there remaineth a rest to the people of God. The people that are not looking for the seventh day Sabbath won't see a seventh day Sabbath there after the cross. The Sabbath is not intended to be a period of useless inactivity. The law forbids secular labor on the day of rest of the Lord. The toil that gains a livelihood must cease. No labor for worldly pleasure or profit is lawful upon that day. But as God ceased his labors of creating and rested upon the Sabbath and blessed it, so man is to leave the occupations of his daily life and devote those sacred hours to healthful rest and worship and to holy deeds. And this is some of the stuff they said that with Christ and the disciples was violating as they picked something to eat off of trees to eat. The work of Christ is healing the sick, was in perfect accord with the law. It honored the Sabbath. So we're going to go and we're going to look at this in Hebrews 4:11. Let us labor therefore and enter into that rest, lest any man fall after the same example of unbelief. You see, that is going back once again to Moses. They didn't have faith, but they had unbelief. And that is an example for us today, from the example from the Hebrews. And Merriam-Webster's dictionary, this unbelief talks about skepticism, especially in the matters of religious faith. And if you've seen people put skepticism in studying the scriptures, that is the same thing as unbelief. And it helps people harden their hearts against it. And then I will put in this here. This disobedience continues today. Let us therefore strive to enter that rest so that no one may fall by the same sort of disobedience. And are they doing this disobedience today about the seventh day rest? Yes, they are. Another version. So we must make every effort to enter that place of rest. Then no one will be lost by following the examples of those who refuse to obey. And that there is a reference back to, in this version, back to in Moses' time, the Hebrews, when that they followed and then had to wander for out in the wilderness for all those years. Continuing in Hebrews 4. For the word of God is quick and powerful and sharper than a two-edged sword, piercing even to the dividing asunder of soul and spirit, and of the joints and marrow, and is a discerner of the thoughts and intents of the heart. Neither is any creature that is not manifested in his sight, but all things are naked and open to the eyes of him with whom we have to do. So when people think, well, I'll do this, nobody is seeing it, God sees it. All things are naked. Nothing is hidden to God. And I think that when he's talking to the people there, if you're not going to enter into the rest, that is, keep this, God knows, he sees all these things. And so if somebody is trying to keep and doing these things of unbelief and worshiping another day or other things, he knows because all things are naked and open to him. He sees it all. Now, in this next part is in Hebrews, going toward the last few verses. The title there is Jesus, the great high priest. Seeing then that we have a great high priest that is passed into the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold fast our profession. Now, what does it mean by our profession? Well, we're going to look at the meaning of our profession. When we go to another version of the Bible, it it talks about what our expression is. When we have a great high priest who has gone to live with God in heaven. He is Jesus, the Son of God. So let us continue to express our faith in him. So when it says hold fast our profession, what it is actually doing there, it is our expressing our faith in him. And one of those signs, and I didn't put that in there, is of the people that keep the seventh day Sabbath holy and sanctified. It's a sign that we are his. Now, you remember how we started this today in Hebrews 3:1? Go back and look at that. Wherefore, holy brethren, partakers of the heavenly calling, consider the apostle and the high priest of our profession, Christ Jesus. So we are to daily let people know that we have a day of rest that we have set apart, and it is holy upon us. Continuing in this Hebrews chapter 4, for we have not a high priest which cannot be touched with a feeling of our infirmities, but was in all points tempted as we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore come boldly unto our throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need. So he goes back and talks here, but was in all points tempted as we are. He goes back to talk about when Christ was taken out and was tempted. And when Christ talked about about Moses when he tempted God. But he said here, but was in all points tempted as we are. In other words, what we are going through, Christ has already went through. Yet Christ went through without sin. And then it says, therefore, come boldly onto the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in the time of need. In other words, we are to do the same thing that Christ did. He is our example. And one of those things is in the seventh day Sabbath rest, that we are to set an example for the rest of the world. And here is the other text that's outside um, of the Gospels. It's at the time of the end, which I talked about before. And the dragon was wroth with the woman and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. We're not just to hear them. It's like what Randy Brims when he found out about the feast days. Now I've heard about them. Now what do I do? What do we do when you hear about the seventh day Sabbath? Well, here's the answer, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. And that testimony of Jesus Christ, I believe, is that when people look at us, they can see that we are doing, that we have a life like Christ. And I found this here text simply, and I put it in here because there's been some comments recently uh, about the 6,000 years. And here's what one of the quotes she says about it. And many who profess to believe the Bible record are at a loss to account for what wonderful things which are found in the earth, with the view that creation week was only the 7 literal days, and that the world is now only about 6,000 years old. She didn't say it was 6,000 years about old, but it was about 6,000 years, uh, 6,000 years old. And I know people, and I have been guilty of this too, misquote Mrs. White. So we need to enter into his seventh day Sabbath rest. And I don't know if other people have thought about that before, that in Hebrews 3 and 4, that when it talks about the rest, when you go through and actually analyze it, it is all about the seventh day Sabbath. The whole thing is about the seventh day Sabbath. And this was after the cross.
Very good.
That was good. Thank you, Keith.
As always.
Amen.
Appreciate it.
It's very interesting when you sit down and actually go and study those things.
And everything builds on itself. It's
Yeah.
good.
Well, going back to what Ryan was talking about, for 10 years, I went to the International UFO Congress looking for technology. And there was some people there. There was one of them that talked about things in the heavens. And he was told that the Hubble telescope is out there looking for planets heading our way.
So they know something's coming, right?
They know something's coming. And he went to some telescopes he was a physicist, and he said he went to a couple observatories and he wanted to look at certain areas. And both of the places that he went through, he says, we have been commanded not to look in those areas.
Huh. By the higher ups?
The people that are running the observatories, yeah. So exactly, Ryan, what are they looking at? Yeah.
Looking at something coming from heaven that is filling their hearts with fear.
Yes.
We're living in a wild time. It's getting closer and closer, but it's exciting to hear all these things and know. So when you see things or you hear things, you You know, it's not just, oh, a fantasy. Yeah, right. It's real.
You can say the same thing Paul says. Well, you know, these things have been written before us.
Can I say something about the Sabbath?
Yes.
Yeah.
I heard an interesting commentary about this new book that Charlie Kirk has published about stop in the name of God. And it's in there is mentioned Seventh day Adventism, and that he learned a lot from Seventh day Adventists, and he thought very, very highly of them. That's where he got some of his,
That was his friend.
yeah. Anyway, so here Trump told people to go out and buy this book. So it's coming to the forefront. We're going to be put in the spotlight, and it all comes together. We know that things are wrapping up,
Mm-hmm.
And they all come from surprising ways that we wouldn't have thought of before.
right? I appreciate the studies.
We need to be ready to share our faith.
Yep.
Well, when I was gathering this, because Sandy asked me Wednesday evening if I could say something, you know, and so yesterday I went in and I started doing this study, and the LibreOffice, the program that I use, all of a sudden wouldn't let me do anything.
Mm.
I spent an hour working on it, and then so my son had come in. It's not like it was before, but he fixed it.
Wow. Well, I know the saying is to be forewarned is to be forearmed.
Yeah.
So this is good that we know something's coming. And
Well,
And
all these studies make things more real, and we know that they're going to happen. And we have, you know, going from history and seeing it repeated, and people are like, "Oh, nothing's going to repeat." I'm like, "Yes, it is."
mhm.
Yes.
And things are coming, and you can see it, and it makes it more exciting. And it's, I don't know, I guess it's kind of scary in a way, but you have to have a lot of faith in God and trust Him. And you can't be getting ready; you need to be ready. I mean, our time is
Right.
running, so
And I know you're watching, Abel. Hi.
yes, you better be.
Hi, Abel, wherever
Trying to
you
get
are.
his computer working right so we can have him speak again.
Someone who used to work at NASA years ago had told me that in like the 1970s, they had their eye on the heart of the Orion Nebula. And yet they know that something's coming because there is a
Yeah.
light that changes its form, but they can hear trumpets coming from the heart of the Orion Nebula. So that
They
that
said
totally,
that, but that sounds really strange. I don't know how true that is because that's been for years. But
yeah.
I don't
So I
know.
was something I heard. So I think that's exciting, you know, that they're having trumpet practice. And I think they've been having it since, you know what, he said that was 1970, you know, but time has passed, you know, like what, 50 plus years have passed. And yeah, they're probably ready, you know, ready to.
They were ready back in the 1800s, but we weren't. So
We were.
Yeah.
we'll get it moving
Well,
now.
this guy I talked about was looking through these telescopes, and of course, it always reminded me of oh, what's his name that had a telescope, Plata. But he said that a lot of these people, you know, they know something's coming, and so what they're doing is they're going and building these big, huge places to live underground. And this guy says all they're doing is building their graves.
Amen. Well, I'm glad we're here to spread the word and let people know. And that's why we're out there so people can hear it and they come by and God knows who needs to hear it. And all of a sudden their channel will pop on. They'll be like, oh, what is this? Oh, that's interesting. Let me see. We've had a lot of people say that before. So just say prayers that God will spread it where He knows it needs to be spread.
Yeah, well, maybe these people who are building these underground bunkers will hear Ryan's message about like, whoa,
Yeah.
it is our grave, so we
Yeah.
better go to plan B, right?
Yeah. Keith, you mentioned, I think it was you who mentioned a pastor that you'd heard before speaking on the 360, return to the 360-day calendar. Do you
Yeah,
recall at all?
That wasn't a pastor. That was at the International UFO Congress. And they
Okay.
believe that there's going to be some events that are going to bring us back to the 360-day calendar. You know, some what you talk about, geological events. That's what
Mhm.
they, and see, I heard this 20 years ago. And so when Brent talks about the prophetic years and the literal 360 and the 365, that fits right in. And these guys, you know, I didn't know who these people was, but they was talking about it way back then.
Were these
that
secular
was
people talking about it?
Huh?
that was Charles Wheeling that was the pastor that mentioned that.
No, this was at when I was going to the International UFO Congress. People was talking about these same things.
Secular people then.
Secular, yes, talking about
Okay.
you know Planet X and these things that's in the sky.
Okay, interesting.
Daddy used to talk about it going back to the regular time, but didn't know how or why or anything, but
Yeah,
it would make things, you know, more simple. I guess it's something that happens and the earth kind of adjusts itself or something. And that will make it all back to normal because it's because of the tilt that the days are different, I think.
yeah, and that's what Ryan said. It would make things a lot simpler,
Yeah.
easily understood.
Yeah. Ron, the guy you were talking about, Charlie Wheeling, you said, is that an Adventist preacher or?
Yes, Charles Wheeling. He's passed away now,
Okay.
but yeah, that was many years ago.
He wasn't really with us on some things, but
No,
he
he was
had a
not
lot of good
on
information.
on target on everything. But when I
Well,
was listening to him, that was back in the 80s. That was before I knew about the feast and stuff.
It's amazing you're seeing it from so many different angles. Different people are seeing it. And
mhm.
Yeah.
just says we're getting closer.
Hello, Kimber. I see you on there. I haven't seen you.
Yeah, I'm here. We've been listening.
Okay.
Yeah,
We'll
and,
see
and
you next week.
the idea that the trumpets and the plagues and everything that they will repeat, it only makes sense because people nowadays they aren't really interested in what happened 200 or 300 years ago. Something has to happen now for them to get woke up.
Right.
Yeah, the thought of things in the Bible repeating and enlarging is something that was really impressed on my wife and I probably about 20 years ago. You know, this it's not just a repetition, but it repeats and goes bigger.
Yeah, things that happened in the past are just a small example of what's coming in the future.
That's right. And it's not even an exact, it's just, it's going to happen bigger. He said, my dad used to always talk about that, and he even has sermons on it, history repeating itself. And people are like, nah, and it's like, it will. It is.
You know, that's one of those lessons that really need to take to heart because, you know, when Paul writes that all these things that, you know, happened beforehand were an example to us upon whom the end of the ages has come. That right there tells us that there's going to be repetition and enlargement of the issues.
That's right. Yeah, and Ryan, I had a program a couple years ago. It's called Jerusalem Destroyed, you know, in AD 70 and Jerusalem Destroyed at the Time of the End. Mrs. White says it 5 or 6 times. You had one quote, but the question that was by the 3 disciples was when are you coming again and the end of these things? And AD 70 was not close to the time when Christ was coming back again.
I wonder what they're going to say when he comes and they jump up. Whoa, about time.
Yeah.
Of course, they'll look
Yeah.
around and say, man, it looks a little different.
Yeah, way more obvious, way bigger. It's going to be real hard to believe that evolution and slow geologic change when people are seeing these events happening. They're going to believe it only because they want to believe it, not because their eyes are telling them to believe it.
I heard someone once say that the flood, the Noah's Ark flood was basically God rescuing people from what was about to occur. And he kind of, the person that told me this kind of hinted that that's how it's going to be in the end too. He's going to rescue us from the planet. And with the things that you were explaining today, that sounds like what we need. And he rescues us from sin. So yes, he's our rescuer in all aspects.
That's what the rapture people think too. They're not worried. They know he's gonna
Yeah, except
wrap
they
them
think
up
he's
before it
gonna.
happens.
Yeah, except rapture people think he's gonna take them out beforehand, and you're not gonna have to walk through the water of the Red Sea as it parts. Like, since when has God done that? We always have to go through it.
People that think they're going to be taken out before it happens must not have read Matthew 24, because in Matthew 24 it says, "This will happen to you."
Very good. Yep.
Yeah, we can see, they think that they'll be like Peter walking on water. Well, we know how that ended up.
You have to have complete faith and trust and
Eyes on him.
yep.
Just like when Peter was walking on the water, he looked at how horrible things were around him. We can't do that. We need to just keep our total focus on him.
On him.
Man.
Yeah,
And
because
some
he
people
could,
get carried away with things that are going on. It's like, don't worry about it right now. Just
yeah, he
keep
could walk
going
on the water
forward
until he took
and
his eyes off of Jesus.
you can look at that and know where you are, but don't dwell on it and think, oh man, this is going to happen now. And oh, tomorrow this will happen. It's like, no, just as things happen, you know where you are if you've studied and researched things. So,
Well, see, with Peter, when he first started walking on water, it was about Jesus Christ. Then Peter made it about himself. And that's when it went south.
things we need to always remember.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you guys all for being here. And next week, Kimber's on, so he's here. So we'll see him next week, along with I believe Sheldon is next week too.
Cool.
So Sheldon and then Kimber. So, and then I'll get with you, Ryan, to bring you back again. And
Yes.
if John gets something going again, he can let me know. And we gotta get Abel on the computer. So we're
Well-
still waiting, Ron.
This was a blessed Sabbath. I am so happy and excited. I'm going to
Right.
rewatch your video with my family, Brian.